Hello everyone, this is J.D. Seal, Vice President at SkyView Partners, and I'm happy to have you join us this morning for our session on implementing multiple layers of defense. Today's session is presented by Carol Woodbury. We do have our special guest this morning. We'll also have SkyView CEO John Vanderwall will be on the line with us with some exciting news about some things here at SkyView. I know many of you have heard Carol speak previously and have read many of her writings, and if you have, you've often heard her talk about multiple layers of defense. But what we're going to see this morning is what does that mean exactly, and how do you implement these multiple layers of defense, and how do you determine how many layers of defense you need? Today's session is sponsored, happily, by us at SkyView Partners. SkyView Partners delivers security administration and compliance reporting solutions for IBM I, AIX, and Linux, and the key word here is solutions. Our goal is to draw on the unparalleled expertise of our team of experts led by Carol to consult with and provide customers answers to and help them automate mundane administrative tasks as well as compliance reporting and to overall improve their security. Today's presenter is Carol Woodbury, co-founder, president, and CEO of SkyView Partners. Prior to forming SkyView, Carol spent 16 plus years at IBM in positions including Chief Engineering Manager and Security Architect for IBM's I-Series Security Group. Carol is also the author of the book IBM I Security Administration and Compliance, which is available at MC Press Online. SkyView Partners has many solutions that can help. Our SkyView Managed Services for Security Administration is a monthly service where critical security administration topics are monitored and you are notified if something needs attention. We find this very popular with our clients. We also provide security checkups for IBM I, AIX, and Linux, as well as our remediation services for special projects. SkyView software includes our Risk Assessor, Independent Vulnerability Assessment, Policy Minder, Automated Security Administration, Audit Journal Reporter, Auditor Ready Reports, and also the Policy Minder for Open Systems. And keep in mind, all SkyView Partner software is available on an unlimited software license. So with that, I want to turn the presentation over to Carol for implementing multiple layers of defense. Carol?
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. As JD was saying, a lot of times when I speak, I talk about implementing multiple layers of defense. And I realize that maybe not everyone understands what I mean when I say that. So it's never ever good to use a term without it being defined. So I thought that this morning we would take time and define what I mean by implementing multiple layers of defense. So why am I focused on implementing multiple layers of defense? The whole idea with this is that we are attempting to reduce risk to the data. So the more layers you put in, the less risk there is of inappropriate access to that data. So if you haven't caught the whole theme of these latest Coffee with Carols and the latest newsletters, my focus is really trying to bring knowledge of and appreciation for the value of the data that is residing on your IBM I systems. If you think about it not just as data and a system that we have to keep up and keep running and provide access to, it's actually the keeper of an incredibly valuable asset to your organization. And so that asset needs to be protected as that valuable part of the organization, that resource. So what is the risk that I'm talking about? Well, the risk that I'm talking about is the risk of data either being modified outside of the application. Everybody has an application and everybody is having users configured within that application so that only selected users have update access and others will only have read access. And the applications are always configured so that certain users can do some functions, others can do others. But depending on how that application has been implemented, there is a risk that data can be modified outside of the application by something like an FTP or command line access and so forth. So that's the type of risk I'm talking about. Or the risk of it being deleted. And that is typically happening because people have too much authority to the data. And perhaps they can do a share to root or to the library, map a drive to that share, open up Windows Explorer, and delete objects. Or perhaps it's being read by the wrong individuals. If you think of healthcare data and you think of celebrities or politicians visiting a healthcare facility, and that data is being read by the wrong people, just primarily out of curiosity for what's going on. Or the data may be unavailable because it's been accidentally modified or deleted. And honestly, if we go back to look at the risk to the data, the biggest risk to the data, in my opinion, is that whole accidental issue. Yes, there are malicious individuals. Yes, there are people whose personalities change and decide that they can perhaps make some money on the side and take some information from their organization. But primarily, the good security scheme is lowering the risk of that accidental error. So what we're talking about here in implementing multiple layers of defense is lowering risk. So how many layers is enough? Well, unfortunately, that's one of those it depends questions. And it's going to vary from organization to organization to organization because it's really a business decision. And the business decision is based on how important or how valuable the data is to the organization and how much effort you want to go into to make sure that that data is not compromised or deleted or how much effort are you going to put into making sure that that data is protected against that risk. So again, the whole goal is to reduce the risk to the data. So again, let's have some examples. Financial institutions are going to be less risk averse than perhaps an organization that keeps, we'll say, inventory data. Now, I'm not saying that that inventory data is not important to the organization keeping it, but financial institutions run under so many regulations and are so much in the news about getting networks being breached and so forth that it's likely that there are going to be more layers of defense in a banking institution than in a manufacturing facility, for example. So again, it totally depends on the type of data, the type of organization you're running in. I should probably add some bullets, things like how many compliance requirements, how many laws and regulations the data falls into, and so forth. But the whole goal is to reduce the risk to the data. So what we're going to focus on today is we're going to start at the data and what is the risk that is the closest to the data. So the absolute thing that is the absolute closest to the data is the level of the security of the operating system. So the first layer of defense that I will recommend that you put into place, and almost if I could, I demand it, that all systems must be running at least level 40, if not 50. And level 40 is sufficient. I'm not saying that people should move to 50, but what I'm saying is that that is critical. And why is that critical? It's because you can't depend on the integrity of the data or the operating system if the system is not running at 40 or 50. And I feel so strongly about this that there are some folks, some organizations that still have systems running at security level 20. Now, the problem with 20 is that by default, all users get all objects, so that everybody's an administrator. But because of the vulnerabilities of the operating system running at level 20 and level 30, I would rather have those people running at level 20 move to level 40 and just re-grant everybody all objects, because at least the operating system is at a place where you can depend on the integrity of the operating system. So that's why I am so very adamant about getting systems to level 40 or 50. Okay, so these rings are going to go outward from the data. What is closest to the data? In this case, it's the level of the operating system. Okay, so let's move outwards. The next thing that expands and is directly at the object or at the data level are things like object level security. So the next layer of defense that I would recommend in this outside ring is implementing good object level security. So you have files that contain the financial information or HR information. What are the authority settings on that file? Okay. The other thing to address at this point in time are access capabilities for the user profiles. How many users have all object special authority? And then the other thing that you might want to consider is encrypting your data. So obviously the encryption is very close to the data because it actually affects the data. So at this point in time, you might want to put a layer of defense that would cause either certain columns in a database file to be encrypted, or maybe you're thinking about encrypted backups or that type of thing. But certainly encryption has to come into play when you're considering implementing multiple layers of defense. So again, we're moving outward, out from the data. So the third layer of defense are things like getting your user profile configuration straightened out. Things like getting rid of default passwords, making sure that the group membership is appropriate, implementing the limited capability settings. And people will say to me, well, users limited capabilities doesn't provide all of the protection that it used to, and that's absolutely true, but it's still a good idea. So your application users that are coming in and using an application, if they can get to a command line and they're not limited capabilities yet, they can enter commands from that command line. So you still want to implement limited capability settings to be limited capability yes for those end users. And then getting rid of inactive profiles. I think you've heard me say before, it's kind of a pet peeve of mine to have inactive profiles on the system, especially if those inactive profiles are actually still set at a status of enabled where they can be used. Okay, so that's the third layer, and hopefully you can see as we move out from the inner ring, we're moving farther away from the data, if you will. All right, the next layer. What's the next layer? Well, then we start getting, again, more at the outer banks, if you will. Secure DDM, exit points, strong passwords, shares to root, auditing, encrypted communications. You can see as we move out that it's farther away from the data. So obviously, we need to be managing those shares to the root directory. Why do I care about that? That's because if you share root, you are actually sharing all of your library structure, so not just your directory structure, and you may have confidential data in that structure, but you also have an awful lot of data in your library structure. Sharing root shares your library structure to your entire network. So shares to root are something to look at. Strong passwords. I really recommend that systems these days go to the password level 2 or 3, preferably 3, which allows for passphrases. That greatly increases the character set that you can have for your passwords, so it makes them much less easily guessed. You can still keep them short if you need to, like still make them maximum level length of 10 if you need to, but in this case it will allow upper and lower case, spaces, punctuation. So again, it's so much less easily guessed if you can implement strong passwords. So exit points. Again, there's exit points are on this outer band simply because they are more at the network level, and so they're farther away from the data. Again, that's maybe a layer of defense that you want to implement, but it's on this outer bank simply because it's farther away from the data. Secure DDM is something that you want to look at. A lot of times DDM is very wide open, allowing communication between two systems with a system or with a profile that has much more capability than the originator. So secure DDM is something to look at. And then encrypted communications. And obviously you don't want data flowing in the clear, especially passwords flowing in the clear. And last but certainly not least, auditing. We need to have auditing on so that you can have the information available. If you don't even monitor it on a daily or weekly basis, you need that information in the audit journal to investigate a breach should one occur, or some sort of incident if one occurs. So then there's a fifth layer, and I'm going to go back one screen for the moment. I say and others. This is not a comprehensive list of all of the layers that you may or may not want to implement. So I want to make sure that you see that there are others that could be listed on this chart. I was just trying to give you some examples of things that kind of move out from the data and options for you to implement from a multiple layer of defense point of view. Then you have a fifth layer, and the fifth layer, I'll say, are external to the system. So most people have firewalls. I don't know of organizations that don't these days, but firewall settings can be stronger or less strong. Okay, so firewall settings come into play here. You may have implemented or choose to implement a technology called DLP, or data loss prevention, which really is about movement, detecting movement of data throughout your network. And you can either log that or you can prevent that from happening. And this is different than exit programs residing on IBM I. This is in your network environment. So data that flows down to your desktop or to a USB port. Think of a external hard drive or that type of thing. So there's technology that you can put in place that prevents and at least logs the movement of data throughout your organization. And then again, last but certainly not least, are people. There is a huge amount of defense that you can put in place by educating your employees and contractors and the people that come in contact with the data. I know that most organizations will do a pretty good job of doing a security education when people are initially hired. They'll talk about data being confidential and that you can't share data and that type of thing, but that is never refreshed after they are hired. So a lot of the phishing schemes that are out there these days are successful because people have not been educated on what to look for email schemes coming out, right? If we weren't tricked into replying to those emails or clicking on links, those attempts would go away. But people are still sucked into those. And so we can protect our organizations and our data significantly if we would just do a better job of educating the people that come in contact with that data. And again, there are other things that I have not even mentioned, things like bring your own device and how that might be implemented, or just your security policy and making sure that all the things that need to be in that security policy are there. So there's, again, a multiple number of things that can be put in place to protect your data. So the question now becomes, how many layers and which ones, right? So we've got all of these issues out here. So which ones do we actually go for? Well, the thing that you want to think through when you're thinking of which ones and how many, the idea with multiple layers of defense is if one fails, is there another layer of defense that will be in place that will prevent the accidental error or the intruder or the insider that wants to download data inappropriately? Is there a layer of defense that will be in place that will stop the action from happening? So if you look at this chart, say that we have implemented strong passwords and you've gotten rid of inactive profiles and the system is running at security level 40 or 50. Okay, if you think about it, this layer of defense is going to allow people to have to guess a very strong password to be able to get into the system. Okay, so that's ring one. Okay, and then the fact that you've gotten rid of inactive profiles means that it would probably go detected if somebody was coming on the system as somebody else. You've got auditing going so that you can detect what the activity is, so that's good. And the system is running at 40 or 50. Now, this may be sufficient layers of defense for some organizations. All right, I am not going to pass judgment on what your business decisions are for implementing, for which layers of defense you are implementing. However, for some people, for some organizations, you may need to implement all of these to meet the requirements of your risk reduction. Again, from a financial point of view, a lot of people in the financial organizations have to implement most, if not all, of these layers of defense to meet regulatory requirements and to just get the risk down to the tolerance level that your organization can tolerate. So the other thing is that if you look at this picture, it may be intimidating, and I don't want to imply that's intimidating, or I don't want it to be intimidating to you. So what I want you to do, and how I want you to have it be meaningful for your organization, is that the last Coffee with Carol, we talked about at the very end the fact that you need a risk assessment. And so once you have that risk assessment, you can put the vulnerabilities that were discovered in that risk assessment in kind of these rings. And you can decide, well, which ones make the most sense for my organization to meet our risk requirements. And then you can start picking them off. Now, obviously, the ones that are the closest to the data, just from a sheer how much time is this going to take, how much do I need to know about the application or the data and the users that are accessing it, some of these projects, the encrypted data project, access capabilities, these may take more time. They may be something that you want to implement, but they might take some time to architect and get organized and so forth. So you may choose to pick off, if you will, some low-hanging fruit. So things like getting rid of default passwords, all right, or getting rid of the inactive profiles, or just simply making sure that your users all of your end users are set to limited capabilities, yes. What I want to emphasize is that any layer of defense that you put in is going to reduce the risk. So all of these that have been turned black have reduced the risk to the data. Obviously, some will reduce the risk to the data more than others. But the point is, when you address and when you put in one layer of defense, it does reduce risk. And that's the point of this whole exercise, reducing risk to the data. So my plea for people is to start somewhere. If we go back and look, like I said, maybe there's some just things that are very easy to implement and won't take all that much time, or knowledge of an application and so forth. Put those things in place. You are getting started. It is reducing the risk, and it won't ever be as risky as it is today. So move forward. So with that, I would like to turn it over to my business partner, John Vanderwall, and you can see our contact information here if you'd like more information on the products and services that SkyView Partners provides. John?
Thank you, Carol. I wanted to spend a few moments and talk about our solutions focus here at SkyView. What we've seen with a number of the customers that we've worked with over the years is that security is always on the list for the systems administrator, and it's usually number 8. And this is what I always tell people when I visit them. And they never get past number 5 on their list of things to do. And if they do get past number 5 on their list of things to do, they never reach number 8 because 5 new things will come on the list that they need to address before security. It's always been kind of one of those things that's the forgotten stepchild, if you will. So what do we do well at SkyView? Well, we've done services for years. In the decade that we've been in existence, actually the decade plus that we've been in existence, we've worked with hundreds of customers helping them address security. The way we worked in the past, and often what we did, was do huge remediation projects. And while we continue to do work like that, what we've seen is that it can be somewhat catastrophic to companies and their end-user organizations as they roll out a new security scheme. It can be very upsetting to a lot of people. So we've changed the way we want to do services here at SkyView, and as JD pointed out early on, talked about solutions, we're going to be talking about solutions. And as Carol has presented in her talk today, you saw that there are a number of little projects that you can embark upon to help improve security and reduce risk. So that's the direction we're going. We're going to be meeting you where you're at with security, and we will happily embark upon projects a little bit at a time, over time, to improve security. So we don't have to go and look at huge, very expensive remediation gigs and engagements anymore, but we can look at projects to help you get better over time. Now the benefit is that as you embark on small projects, your user community can get used to how the new approach to security, rather than having to take into consideration all kinds of new security changes. They can maybe get used to something a little bit at a time, and then you embark on the next project and improve security just a little bit more. So that's what we're doing, is we're changing to more project focus. Think of it as meeting you where you're at and helping you improve a little bit at a time, going as far as you want to go to improve security. And you can think of those circles that Carol has drawn as maybe some different projects you want help with, and we will do that. We're also introducing managed services. One of the big things that we've seen with the system admins and the fact that security is always number 8 and it never gets addressed only when an auditor shows up, is that there's a level of comfort that most corporations would have, small or large, if they knew that somebody was paying attention to at least some key security indicators on a monthly basis or on a periodic basis. And that's what we're doing. We're introducing managed services for security administration, where SkyView, the experts in security, and our team led by Carol Woodbury, will monitor various aspects or key security indicators. We'll provide the solutions for you, the tools that you need, so you don't have to go out and invest in anything as part of the service opportunity or the managed services. We'll also do a security checkup so that we will know where you stand the day we walk in the door, so to speak, and then we can work with you to decide what sort of things you want to address and what things you want to monitor. So we're doing that on a very low monthly fee basis. And if you want to increase the amount of money you pay us each month, we will happily start to embark on projects to help improve security as well as part of that whole offering. So our focus is more on project security and doing managed services and making it be very cost effective and affordable for the small organizations all the way up to large organizations, and really helping them improve security over time. So those are the things that I really wanted to talk about and introduce you to the fact that, you know, our watchwords going forward is solutions, and listening to you guys on how we can help you improve your security in a very cost-effective and affordable way over time. So that's all I have to say. Thank you for listening. JD?
Well, thank you, John and Carol, and thank you all for joining us this morning. If you have questions, you can come to our website at skyviewpartners.com or give us a call. We'll be happy to work with you. Carol?